Hello, everyone, and welcome to the fourth segment of today's show here on the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast. We are moving from more of a rankings and bettings perspective to a more fantasy football perspective, because that is what this show is all about. But also, I kind of feel like flex options don't get talked about often enough. You understand? And the reason why I love flex options so much is that these are the guys who can sneakily get you a lot of fantasy points. And the four guys that I have on my list right here are all guys who performed very well last week. All guys who I think, if you give them the opportunity, can potentially be that guy that gets you a lot of points. Me personally, I don't have anyone of note on my team who is like four of these guys mentioned, but at the end of the day, at every single position, I'll give you a guy who I think will keep you on schedule. So let's get on with it. The first guy had a very big game in his new home, and I think that he will continue to be able to produce in this offense as well. Now, that's J.K. Dobbins, and it's pretty simple. He's only getting the Panthers. And not to, harp on picking teams and players against the Panthers, but come on. The run defense just got a big hit. Derek Brown suffering a season-ending injury. And J.K. Dobbins, really looks very comfortable in this Jim Harbaugh system. I thought the main worry there was that coming over from a system where his explosiveness was needed in a Greg Roman offense in Baltimore, moving to Jim Harbaugh's system where he needs to be a little bit more timely and really be more of a workhorse, and also combining that with his injury history, I thought that might cause a little bit of an issue and cause me to be skeptical about him. But no, he's one of the best running back performers in fantasy. And at 22.9 points, he's someone who I feel like can start even as well. Maybe as an RB2 in a deeper league. So look out for J.K. Dobbins to be a guy, especially against the Panthers, who will wreak havoc this weekend. And then when I go to the wide receiver position, we talked about this guy a little bit earlier in today's show. Rashid Shaheed. Rashid Shaheed, yes, I don't think this game will be very pretty for the Saints offense, but Rashid Shaheed profiles as someone who might be able to get open in certain situations. And so, looking at the overall perspective of what the Saints might want to do against teams that they might not necessarily have to win against to get into the playoffs, but teams that are far superior to them in the NFC, is just rely on the deep ball. I think that Derek Carr's deep ball is heavily underestimated right now as one that really gets under-respected a lot, and I think that a lot of people expect it to decline at some point, but it is simply the best part of this offense. And Rashid Shaheed last week, 16.3 fantasy points, had a beautiful touchdown on that deep ball. So I think that if they want to stay alive in this game and you want someone who potentially can be a deep threat, get you a lot of yardage in terms of fantasy production, then Rashid Shaheed could be your guy. I think that it's going to have to be a week-by-week thing because we really can't glean that much from the Saints offense off of a performance against one of the weakest defenses in the league and then one of the strongest defenses in the league. We might want them to face, say, the Falcons in their own division or the Bucks to see and really say how we can refine the Saints offense. But for now, Rashid Shaheed remains an intriguing option for you in terms of flex because he's someone who doesn't necessarily profile as a wide receiver 1 or 2 in my opinion, but can add some value as a deep threat. And then, of course, the darling, perhaps, of this last fantasy weekend here, Isaiah Likely. And yes, I think that Isaiah Likely's production largely depends on the Ravens' game flow and whether or not they want to maintain a run game with Derrick Henry or, pass the football. And it all also depends on the O-line, right? Because that O-line was one of the more skeptical parts of this offense in that game. So I think that if you want to develop a passing game, and be able to move the chains for the passing game, you're going to need a guy like Isaiah Likely. I think that the best parts of what I saw out of the Ravens offense last week was those little screen action passes to Justice Hill, and then of course Isaiah Likely emerging as a target for Lamar Jackson. So I think that at the end of the day, keeping that balance in the Baltimore Ravens offense might mean that we see less of Isaiah Likely, but in the moments that he's on the field, I think that he ultimately will profile as someone that Lamar Jackson can look to, especially, if Lamar Jackson has to work out of structure. So, again, I think that he's also a week-by-week guy, but 26.1 fantasy points last week. Definitely, if you're not thinking of him as a starter, which I think he could be as the season goes on, then that's definitely a positive part of the flex option for you. And then the last one here, we talked about this guy as a quarterback going into this game. This could definitely change week by week because I know him as a Seahawks fan as someone to be very volatile in his play, especially in fantasy purposes, and that is Geno Smith. And I'm not as confident now as I was when I wrote this in terms of putting Geno Smith as a flex option, and he's definitely someone who is a deeper league or a 2 QB league kind of fail. So the thing about Geno that I do like, though, is that at any given moment he can give you the highest high and also the lowest low. That's what I mean in terms of flex for a quarterback here. He had that beautiful kind of mazy 34-yard run in that game, but also threw an ugly pick in the first possession of that game. So he's a very definitely a mixed bag in terms of the QB position. But if you're in a 2 QB league, like I said, in a deeper league, in a dynasty league or something of that nature, Geno Smith might be a fun guy to play around with week by week. These are the four guys that I really came off the top of my head based off of their last performances that I really think can be cemented as guys who can play in your flex. But let me know what you think in the comments. In terms of other guys, though, who at each position I think could have big games, because I want to fill this segment a little bit more. How about Zach Moss, let's say? And the reason why I throw out Zach Moss here is because Zach Moss is someone who I think needs to get more touches in that Bengals offense. And the reason why I say this is because if you have concerns about Joe Burrow beyond the wrist injury and beyond the external issues off the field for Cincinnati, then why not use Zach Moss? Because he's someone who I think really profiles as someone who can immediately impact this offense. And I don't think he's going to always get a lot of touches. We saw he only got like 3 touches. Him and Chase Brown only got like 3 or so touches each. So it's kind of weird to put him in that kind of context here. But at this moment in time, I feel like Zach Moss could be, especially in this game with the Chiefs, when they might want to establish the run game a bit more, get a lot more targets. In terms of wide receivers, how about DJ Moore? I mean, he's my flex guy right now, and I really want him to be comfortable in this offense as he's the most experienced, especially considering how Caleb Williams struggles largely stem from perhaps not relying upon one guy or the other. It makes any sense. If the structure, right, where one guy gets an X percentage of targets, and another guy gets a certain percentage of targets, and the third guy gets a percentage of targets, then maybe Caleb Williams will be comfortable with knowing the layout of what his game script looks like. If not, and he's constantly performing out of structure, then that's where calamity could lead and stem from. So I think that DJ Moore is an X factor in the Bears offense, and if you want someone who I feel like will eventually get more targets than you think, then DJ Moore can be that guy. But then I look at quarterbacks as well. Quarterbacks are weird because they're not seen as a quote-unquote flex position. If you're in a deep league, Baker's definitely an option, but I'm going to throw out a wild one here. How about Gardner Minshew? I think that the large part of the Raiders' offense that I feel doesn't work is the fact that they're still tension carrying over from last season. So you want to have your quarterback play more freely so as to kind of loosen up this offense. I'm not saying Gardner Minshew has to be perfect in his play, is what I'm trying to get at here. I'm just saying he kind of has to be confident and comfortable with being a guy who can stay ahead of schedule here. And so what will look like could mean that he gets a larger volume of targets here. And at the end of the day, it's something that you might have to watch out for if you're someone who wants to follow quarterbacks more closely. And if you're in a league where kind of looking at different ways to take advantage of certain situations. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, because flex position is definitely one that's kind of hard to gauge here. But coming up next to close today's show and the week here on the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, we give you my updated MVP odds. Week 1 has officially concluded and we're heading into week 2, so why not do some way too early looks at the MVP odds for this season. We'll be right back to conclude the show in a week. That's saying after this quick break.